Hello and welcome to the science tutorial. Today we're going to learn about the brachial plexus, what it innervates, and how we can draw it so it's easy to remember on test day. A plexus of nerves is defined as a network of interconnected nerves that come out of the spinal cord. So you have different plexuses in different areas of your body, and those can be your lumbar plexus, your sacral plexus, your cervical plexus, but in this video we're going to be focusing on the brachial plexus itself. Now, the brachial plexus arises from the anterior rami of spines C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1. This is the area of your neck. The brachial plexus is related to this structure over here known as the axillary artery, as well as passes through the two scalene muscles. The brachial plexus can be divided into 5 different parts. First, you have your roots. So the roots arise from the spinal cord itself. After that, it goes on to divide into trunks. Now, trunks can be found at the level of your neck. After that, the trunks divide into anterior and posterior divisions, which are located posterior to the clavicle. After that, they form the cords, which are one of the most important aspects or the important parts of the brachial plexus. And these can be found entering your axilla, also known as your armpit. The cords then give rise to the branches. And these branches will then go into the upper limbs. Now, the brachial plexus is responsible for the motor innervation of all of the muscles of the upper limb, except for the trapezius, which is supplied by the cranial accessory nerve, as well as the levator scapula, which is supplied by the cervical nerve C3 and C4. It also supplies all of the skin innervation of the upper limb, except for the areas of the axilla, your armpit, which is supplied by the supraclavicular nerve, and the dorsal scapular area, which is supplied by the cutaneous branches of the dorsal rami. Now that we've understood the definition, function, and anatomy of the brachial plexus, it's now time to learn how to draw it in order to make it easier for test day. So now we're going to learn on how we can draw the brachial plexus. Now, if you remember, as I told you earlier, that the brachial plexus can be divided into 5 different parts. And these parts include your roots, your trunks, your divisions, anterior and posterior, as well as your cords, finally ending off with their respective branches. Now, if we start from the roots, we know the roots of the brachial plexus include C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1. So these are your roots. Now, these roots give rise to trunks. We have 3 trunks in our brachial plexus, the upper, middle, and lower trunk. The first trunk, which is the upper trunk, is given by the combining of C5 and C6. C7 will then give rise to the middle trunk all by itself. Then C8 and T1 will follow exactly what C5 and C6 did and join together to form the lower trunk. The trunks then each give rise to anterior and posterior divisions. Now, this is where it gets a bit confusing, but if you can get past this, the rest of the brachial plexus will be fairly simple to understand. The anterior divisions of the upper trunk and the middle trunk will come together in the top and form what is known as the lateral cord. The anterior divisions of the lower trunk will go alone and form the medial cord. Then finally, you have the posterior division of the upper trunk the middle trunk and the lower trunk coming together in the middle to form one of the most important components of the brachial plexus, the posterior cord. So now just as a quick recap, the upper, middle, and lower trunks all give rise to anterior and posterior divisions. The anterior divisions of the upper and the middle trunk will join together to give the lateral cord. The anterior division of the lower trunk by itself will give rise to the medial cord. And the posterior divisions of all the trunks will join together in the middle to give rise to the posterior cord. Now, each of these cords have their own respective branches. So what are they? First, we're going to start with the lateral cord. The lateral cord gives rise to 3 branches. The first one being your lateral pectoral nerve. The second branch that the lateral cord will give is 1/2 or 1 part of the median nerve. And finally, it will give rise to one of the most important nerves known as the musculocutaneous nerve. Now, the musculocutaneous nerve is in charge of supplying the flexor muscles of the arm as well as the skin overlying the lateral forearm. So again, a quick recap. The lateral cord will give rise to the lateral pectoral, lateral part of the median nerve, as well as the musculocutaneous nerve. Now we move on to the medial cord. The medial cord will give rise to 5 branches. Now, if you have a lateral pectoral nerve, then you also have a medial pectoral nerve. The medial cord gives rise to the median part and the second half of the median nerve. The lateral part of the median nerve coming from the lateral cord and the medial part coming from the medial cord join together to form the median nerve. Now, the median nerve supplies the lateral 3.5 parts of the palm and the fingers, as well as the lumbrical muscles in the hand and some of the flexor muscles in the forearm. The medial cord also, like the lateral cord, gives rise to a very important nerve, and that is known as your ulnar nerve. The ulnar nerve supplies some of the flexor muscles of the forearm, the intrinsic muscles of the hand, as well as the medial 1.5 part of the palm and finger, as well as the back of the hand. The last 2 divisions of the medial cord are the medial cutaneous nerve of the forearm and the arm. So now, as a quick recap for the medial cord, we have the medial pectoral nerve, the medial cutaneous nerve of the arm and the forearm, the second half of the medial part of the median nerve, as well as the ulnar nerve. Then we finally move on to the posterior cord. Now, the posterior cord gives rise to 5 branches as well. From the posterior cord itself, we can find 3 nerves. The first one is your thoraco-dorsal nerve, or the nerve to the latissimus dorsi. The second and third nerves are the upper subscapular and the lower subscapular nerves. And finally, they give off 2 very important branches, and these are your radial nerve and your axillary nerve. Now, the radial nerve supplies the muscles of the posterior compartment of the arm and the forearm, and the axillary nerve supplies your teres minor and your deltoid muscles. Now, we've seen the branches of the cords, but we still have to mention that some branches also arise from the roots as well as the trunks. So you have the dorsal scapular nerve, which arises from the C5 root. Another branch that arises from the root is the long thoracic nerve, which stems from C5, C6, and C7. So those are the two that are found stemming from the roots. Now, we also have two more nerves that arise from the trunks, but only the upper trunk. So the upper trunk is the only trunk that gives rise to nerves. And these include your suprascapular nerve as well as your nerve to the subclavius. So why is it important for us to understand the brachial plexus and its pathway? Now, let's say a patient presents to your clinic with symptoms of muscle pain or paralysis or loss of sensation in their skins. And if the injury is nerve related, we can trace back our steps to which part of the brachial plexus might have been damaged. Now, if we look at the lateral cord and we look at the lateral branches, so you have the lateral pectoral, the lateral part of the median, and the musculocutaneous nerve. If we were to trace back the steps for the lateral cord, we can see that they all are supplied from C5, C6, and C7. Similarly, for the medial cord that gives rise to the medial pectoral, the medial cutaneous of the arm and the forearm, the medial part of the median nerve, as well as the ulnar nerve, if we were to retrace our steps back for them, we can see that they arise from C8 and T1. Now, the posterior cord is special because it receives its innervation from all the trunks, hence all the roots. But each of these have different areas of the roots that supply them. So the upper subscapular nerve, the lower subscapular nerve, and the axillary nerve are all supplied by C5 and C6. The thoraco-dorsal nerve is supplied by C6, C7, and C8. And finally, we have the radial nerve that is supplied by C5 all the way through T1. So as a quick recap, we have the roots C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1. C5 and 6 come together to form the upper trunk. C7 forms the middle trunk by itself. The C8 and T1 join together to form your lower trunk. Now each trunk has anterior and posterior divisions respectively. The anterior divisions of the upper and the middle trunk will come together and join to form the lateral cord. The anterior division of the lower trunk will come and form the medial cord all by itself. The posterior divisions of all the trunks will come together and form what is known as the posterior cord. Now, the names of the cords given, lateral, posterior, and medial, are due to their relationship with the axillary artery. So the lateral cord lies lateral to the axillary artery, the medial cord lies medial to the axillary artery, and the posterior cord lies posterior to the axillary artery. The lateral cord will then give out three branches, which is the lateral pectoral, the lateral part of the median nerve, and the musculocutaneous nerve. The medial cord will give rise to five branches, including the medial pectoral nerve, the medial cutaneous nerve of the arm and the forearm, the medial part of the median nerve, as well as the ulnar nerve. And finally, you have the posterior cord that gives rise to the thoraco-dorsal, upper and lower subscapular, radial, and axillary nerves. Our roots, we have C5 giving rise to subscapular, and C5, C6, C7 giving rise to the long thoracic nerve. And the upper trunk being the only trunk from which we can find branches, we have the nerve to subclavius as well as the suprascapular nerve. And that concludes our science tutorial on the brachial plexus. If this video helped you out, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, as well as share this video for more future science tutorials. Thank you and have a great day.